In a remote Alaskan village, where the biting cold lingered like an unwelcome guest, Jacob Anderson stood amidst a gathering of skeptical neighbors. The wind howled with a frigid intensity, swirling snowflakes around him as he unveiled his unconventional wall design for his cabin. "You can't be serious, Jacob," one man scoffed, his breath visible in the icy air. "That's just a waste of time and resources." Laughter rippled through the crowd, a mix of disbelief and derision echoing in the stark winter landscape. Jacob remained undeterred, his resolve firm as he explained his innovative approach to insulation, drawing from the materials readily available in their harsh environment. The villagers were accustomed to traditional building methods, with thick logs stacked side by side, promising warmth against the relentless Alaskan winters. But Jacob had observed something different. He believed that a layered wall system, utilizing locally sourced materials, could offer superior insulation. "This design traps air better than solid walls, and air is the best insulator," Jacob insisted, gesturing to the sheets of birch bark and moss he had gathered. The laughter subsided momentarily, replaced by murmurs of disbelief and skepticism. Despite the mockery, Jacob began the construction of his cabin. He layered the birch bark between logs, interspersed with layers of moss and clay, creating a wall that resembled a cake more than a cabin. "What's next? You going to decorate it with flowers?" another neighbor chuckled. Jacob simply smiled, knowing that innovation often comes with a price of ridicule. As he worked, the temperature continued to drop, the sun barely rising above the horizon, casting a pale glow on the thick blanket of snow that enveloped the village. Gathering his materials was no easy feat. The villagers watched him struggle against the elements, hauling heavy bundles of moss and birch bark through knee-deep snow. Each day, whispers followed him like a shadow. "He'll be the first to freeze," one old-timer remarked, shaking his head. "Mark my words, his cabin will be a joke when winter truly hits." But Jacob had a vision, an unyielding belief that his design would stand the test of time and the severe cold. As Jacob meticulously constructed the walls, he also considered the roof, crafting it in a manner that would shed snow efficiently while still offering insulation. He recalled the stories of old, when pioneers used whatever they could find to survive, adapting their methods to the land. This cabin would be a testament to those forgotten inventions, blending traditional wisdom with his own innovative twist. Meanwhile, the villagers continued their preparations for winter, relying on conventional methods. They laughed at Jacob's crazy ideas while stacking firewood and sealing their homes with thick, solid walls. Jacob's cabin slowly took shape, a whimsical structure defying the norms of their isolated community. The walls, with their rustling layers of moss, seemed to dance in the wind, reflecting Jacob's spirit, a mix of hope and stubbornness. The first snowstorm of the season arrived with a ferocity that caught everyone off guard. Winds howled like a pack of wolves, gusting through the trees and sending snow spiraling in every direction. As the village was enveloped in white, Jacob's cabin stood strong, its unique construction seemingly buoyed by the storm. Inside, Jacob felt a warmth that he had only dreamed of during the cold nights spent in his makeshift shelter. While his neighbors struggled to keep their homes warm, stoking their fires and wrapping themselves in layers of blankets, Jacob remained comfortable, the layered walls doing their job. He could hardly believe it himself. Was it really working? The storm raged on, snow piling high against the door of his cabin, while outside the villagers huddled inside their homes, battling the elements. With each passing hour, Jacob's confidence grew. The laughter of the villagers echoed in his mind, a distant memory as he settled into his warm space, sipping tea and watching the snow swirl outside. After the storm had passed, a silence fell over the village, broken only by the occasional crack of ice settling and the soft crunch of snow underfoot. When the sun emerged the next day, it revealed a landscape transformed, and soon the neighbors ventured out, weary and cold, to assess the damage. The sight of Jacob's cabin, standing sturdy and inviting amidst the chaos, sent shockwaves through the community. The villagers couldn't ignore the contrast any longer. Jacob's cabin, surprisingly warm and intact, became a beacon of curiosity. "Maybe he's onto something," one woman whispered, glancing at her husband, who nodded reluctantly. As they gathered around Jacob, the atmosphere shifted from mockery to intrigue. Welcome to our journey through the forgotten inventions of survival. Make sure to subscribe to explore more fascinating stories. Jacob smiled, ready to share the knowledge that had been birthed from ridicule and necessity, uniting the community in a newfound respect for his invention. The stage was set, winter had arrived, and so too had the beginning of a new understanding. As winter descended upon the remote Alaskan village, the villagers found themselves at the mercy of extreme cold, with blizzards sweeping through the landscape, transforming the world into a frozen wonderland. The winds howled relentlessly, sending snow swirling and piling high against the homes that had once offered refuge. As temperatures fell to a biting -30 degrees Fahrenheit, the community began to witness the true test of Jacob's unconventional wall design. The first storm hit with a fury that left many unprepared. Inside their homes, the inhabitants struggled to maintain warmth, stoking their fires and layering on blankets as the wind battered against their walls. Jacob, however, sat comfortably in his cabin, the heat radiating around him. He marveled at how well his layered wall system was performing, feeling the subtle warmth that enveloped him like a gentle hug. Outside, neighbors gathered in their yards, shoveling snow and shaking their heads in disbelief. "What kind of madman builds a cabin like that?" an older man muttered as he glanced toward Jacob's home, its unique structure standing resilient against the storm. "It's a joke! Just wait until this winter really sets in." The murmurs carried through the village, but Jacob remained undeterred. He had faith in his design, which integrated layers of birch bark, moss, and clay to create an effective insulation barrier against the harsh elements. While the villagers struggled to keep their homes at a livable temperature, Jacob's cabin exhibited a stark contrast. He had incorporated a design that allowed for minimal heat loss, utilizing the thermal mass of the materials he had chosen. As the wind whipped around, the cabin maintained a cozy interior, making Jacob's initial vision a reality. Days turned into weeks, and as the storms continued to batter the village, Jacob's cabin became a focal point of curiosity. Villagers would steal glances at his home, discussing their own difficulties with the relentless cold. "We can't keep this up," one woman lamented, rubbing her hands together as she stood by the flickering fire. "It's only going to get worse." Meanwhile, Jacob was conducting his own informal experiment. He placed a thermometer inside his cabin and monitored the temperature as the storm raged outside. While his neighbors struggled to keep their homes over 50 degrees Fahrenheit, Jacob's cabin maintained a steady 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The contrast was undeniable, and slowly, the whispers began to shift from ridicule to intrigue. One particularly frigid evening, as the winds howled, a few neighbors gathered near Jacob's cabin, drawn to the warmth radiating from within. They hesitated at first, unsure of how to approach him after having mocked his efforts for so long. But curiosity got the better of them. They knocked on the door, and Jacob welcomed them inside, offering them a seat by the fire. "Can you believe this?" one man exclaimed, shaking off the snow from his coat. "You're actually warm in here." Jacob smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and vindication. "It's all in the design," he said, gesturing toward the layered walls. "The birch bark insulates, the moss retains moisture, and the clay acts as a barrier against the wind." As they settled into the warmth, the neighbors began to ask questions, their skepticism slowly melting away in the cozy atmosphere of the cabin. Jacob explained how he had used local materials, drawing from the wisdom of those who had come before him. "It's not just about building a wall," he said. "It's about understanding how these materials interact with the environment." The more he spoke, the more fascinated they became. They observed how the walls of Jacob's cabin weren't just thick. They were alive with the natural elements, capable of regulating temperature and mitigating the effects of moisture. The villagers, once adamant that Jacob's design was foolish, began to reconsider their own approaches to winter preparedness. "If this really works," one woman mused, "maybe we should be looking into how we can adapt our homes too." Jacob nodded, noting the genuine interest in their voices. "It's all about adaptation," he replied. "What works for one person might not work for another, but there's always something to learn from each other." As the storm continued to rage outside, the villagers found themselves captivated by Jacob's methods. They peppered him with questions, eager to understand the intricacies of his wall design. With every response, Jacob felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was not just building a cabin, but fostering a community of innovative thinkers. Winter continued its relentless grip, and as it persisted, Jacob's cabin became a beacon of hope and curiosity. The villagers, once skeptical, began to gather regularly around his home, exchanging ideas about how they could improve their own living conditions. Jacob's design, once ridiculed, was now the subject of discussions and brainstorming sessions. If you're enjoying this narrative, please give us a thumbs up to support our channel. Jacob called out one evening as laughter and chatter filled the space. The cabin was no longer just his home. It had transformed into a hub of knowledge and collaboration. With each passing storm, the community moved closer toward embracing innovative ideas, inspired by Jacob's resilience and ingenuity. As they shared meals and stories, the atmosphere shifted from skepticism to camaraderie. The blizzard outside was fierce, but inside, warmth spread not just from the well-insulated walls but from the growing bond among the villagers. They were beginning to realize that sometimes the most unconventional ideas could bring about the greatest change. Jacob's cabin stood as a testament to the power of innovation born from necessity, and winter was proving to be a catalyst for transformation within this tight-knit community. As winter progressed into its harshest phase, a subtle transformation took place within the village. Where once Jacob had been the subject of mockery and skepticism, he was now viewed with curiosity and respect. Villagers who had initially dismissed his design as ludicrous began to approach him, seeking knowledge about his unconventional wall system. The relentless cold had forced them to confront their own inadequacies in keeping their homes warm, and Jacob's cabin was a shining example of ingenuity amidst adversity. One afternoon, as the wind howled and snow drifted against the windows, a group of neighbors gathered outside Jacob's cabin. They hesitated at the threshold, exchanging glances filled with uncertainty. Finally, one brave soul knocked on the door. Jacob welcomed them in, and as they stepped inside, the warmth enveloped them like a comforting blanket. "I can't believe how warm it is in here," remarked a woman named Clara, rubbing her gloved hands together as she took a seat by the fire. "We've been struggling to keep our homes above freezing." Jacob smiled, realizing the significance of this moment. "It's all about the wall design," he replied, his voice steady with pride. "The layers of birch bark, moss, and clay create a barrier that keeps the heat inside while repelling the harsh winds." He gestured toward the walls, his enthusiasm palpable. With each explanation, the villagers leaned in closer, their skepticism fading as Jacob laid out the science behind his design. The birch bark provides insulation, the moss absorbs moisture without allowing it to seep in, and the clay adds an additional layer of protection against the elements. "I've monitored the temperature, and while my neighbors struggle to maintain warmth, my cabin holds steady at around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, even in the bitter cold." The villagers exchanged glances, their initial doubt replaced by a flicker of hope. "Is it really that simple?" another neighbor asked, his brow furrowed in thought. "Sometimes, the simplest solutions are the most effective," Jacob replied, feeling a wave of satisfaction wash over him. "You have to pay attention to your surroundings and adapt. Nature provides the answers if you're willing to look." As the days turned into weeks, more villagers found their way to Jacob's cabin, eager to learn from him. They gathered around the fire, sharing stories of their struggles and aspirations, while Jacob taught them about the principles behind his design. The room buzzed with excitement and inspiration, a stark contrast to the isolation and despair that had marked the previous months. One evening, as snow fell outside, Jacob decided to invite the villagers to participate in a workshop. He wanted to help them build their own versions of his wall design, using the same local materials he had utilized. "We can work together to improve our homes," he suggested, his voice resonating with a sense of community. "If we all adapt, we can make this winter bearable for everyone." The response was overwhelmingly positive. The following weekend, villagers gathered at Jacob's cabin, tools and materials in hand, ready to learn and collaborate. Under his guidance, they began to build a small demonstration wall outside his cabin, showcasing the layered approach Jacob had pioneered. If you're enjoying this narrative, please give us a thumbs up to support our channel. Jacob called out, laughing as the group worked together. Their hands were cold, but their spirits were warm as they shared tips and stories, learning from one another in a way that felt both practical and empowering. As they constructed the wall, Jacob explained how each layer interacted with the harsh winter conditions. He demonstrated how to properly position the birch bark for maximum insulation and how to apply the clay to create a secure barrier. The villagers listened intently, asking questions and taking notes. By the time they finished, a sense of accomplishment filled the air. Jacob's design had sparked a newfound sense of camaraderie among the villagers. They now understood that innovation could arise from necessity and that by working together, they could survive even the harshest winters. As the season wore on, Jacob's cabin became a model for others. Villagers began to implement similar techniques in their own homes, adapting the principles he had shared. The transformation was evident. Homes that had once been frigid now radiated warmth and comfort. The community thrived as they learned from each other, inspired by Jacob's resilience and ingenuity. By the end of the winter, Jacob's cabin stood as a testament to the power of forgotten engineering principles. What had once seemed absurd was now embraced as a valuable lesson in survival. Villagers who had laughed at Jacob's design were now advocates of his methods, eager to share their experiences with others. Jacob reflected on how far they had come as a community. The winter that had threatened to isolate them had instead united them, teaching them the importance of adaptability and innovation. As the snow began to melt and spring approached, Jacob knew that the lessons learned would remain relevant long after the icy grip of winter had passed. What did you think of this invention? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to turn on notifications for our next story. Jacob called out one last time, feeling a surge of gratitude for the journey they had all shared. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most unconventional ideas could lead to the most profound changes.